From his base in Finland, Simon Ekpa continues to destabilize the peace of his native southeast of Nigeria with incessant orders by his faction of proscribed indigenous peoples of Biafra, a secessionist group forcing the people to sit at home. Ekpa and his men have in the last 1 month unleashed untold terror in the form of different coordinated attacks on citizens for daring to disobey the sit-at-home order.
Nigeria has continued to bleed heavily from the stranglehold of sit-at-home order by outlawed secessionist group Indigenous Peoples of Biafra, IPOB. The latest threats have come not from the mainstream IPOB, but from a breakaway faction under the guide of Simon Ekpa, an indigene of Ebonyi State who is based in Finland. Last week, Ekpa issued a notice for 1 week of sit-at-home in protest of what he calls the continued detention of the leader of IPOB, Nnamdi Kanu. In the notice, Ekpa declared Monday a total lockdown, Tuesday as no movement day, Wednesday for sit-at-home, Thursday for opening of markets, Friday as don't come outside day, Saturday as stay indoors day. Those who have dared to disobey the order have paid dearly, and in most cases, their lives. Ekpa and his gang of outlaws have turned Ihiala in Anambra State and neighboring Osu and Oru local government areas in Imo State into a killing field. 2 weeks ago, a middle-aged lumberman, Emeka Demezwe, lost his life after suspected IPOB members forced him to fell a tree to block a road at Uli in Ihiala local government area. Last month, Ekpa's men attacked members of Anambra vigilante group at Ogenabo, Okija in Ihiala local government area. The vigilantes were attacked for managing to maintain peace in the area. While it is difficult to determine the exact number of casualties from various IPOB attacks, between 5,000 and 10,000 persons have fallen victims, with many of them security agents, especially policemen. IPOB activities have crippled businesses, inflicting untold hardship on citizens and reducing government revenue. Statements of assurances from state governors and even security forces have done little to make citizens defy the sit-at-home by IPOB. Not even the establishment of regional security outfit, Ebubeagu, has helped to douse tension in the southeast, which is gradually becoming the most dangerous place in Nigeria.
Well, according to Beacon Consulting, a top security firm, it's just released a security report for June, recorded 460 incidents that resulted in 239 abductions and 854 fatalities across Nigeria. That's just for the month of June alone. I have with me the security analyst and chief executive officer of Beacon Consulting, Dr. Kabir Adamu, and also have the current affairs analyst, professor of communications and Deputy Dean of the Postgraduate School at the Bayes University in Abuja, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi. Gentlemen, good to see you both, and thanks for your time as always. You know, national matters like this will worry anyone. Let's start with you, Dr. Kabir Adamu. Beacon Consulting is out with its report. That is worrisome, looking at the figure, almost 1,000. Now, let us in on this before I come to Professor Adeniyi.
Thank you, Suleiman. So what we try to do, we're conscious of the fact that the new government is still trying to form, its government, as it were. It has appointed a few persons within the security sector, and I think generally the reaction or the response of Nigerians is that those persons are capable. So what we've done, like we've always done in the past few years, is to give a presentation of, from a data point of view, metrics, how many persons have died within the period, what were the reasons for those deaths, which regions were affected by the fatality figures more. And what we saw is that the northern part of the country, just like we've seen in previous months, had more fatalities. About 80% of that 800 plus persons were in the northern half of the country. Incidentally, the southeast, despite what we're discussing, featured as the region with the lowest number of deaths. Interestingly, yeah, the southwest had the highest rise month to month. So what that data does to you, it gives you a dashboard where you are able to see those developments. And then if you are interested in a granular understanding, have a picture of what is behind the deaths. So we know, as an example, in almost all the regions, there are non-state armed groups that are challenging the supremacy of the use of force by the state. The same, if you go to the northeast, the same thing. Come to the northwest, north central, southeast, of course, we were discussing the indigenous people of Biafra and the various other factions of that group operating in the southeast. So clearly, that is one feature that moves across Nigeria. There are other threat elements, the farmer harder violence, banditry, violent criminality, name them, that are also affecting. But the one common feature that came almost prominent within our report is the activities of these non-state armed groups. And sadly, the inability of our security measures to prevent the activities of these groups.
I'll come back to you, Dr. Adamu, so that we can talk about what's really behind the death and the figure, quite revealing. Professor Adeni, listening to the two elders from Nigeria Southeast, some of the key concerns will be about that meeting. You think it's too little, too late?
No. I don't think so. I think we need conversation, consultation, more than anything else. You know, listening to them, you know that it's no longer a question of force, no longer a question of kinetic energy, kinetic means, but of course non-kinetic. You know, we are seeing a situation where mind is mattering more over matter, you know, where the psychology of the people are tuned towards self-determination, rightly or wrongly, and of course when you have to probably engage in some level of psychological oppression, you know, and of course this is very legitimate in any kind of tangle, in any kind of contention anywhere around the world. It's even very, very civilized because you do not want to deploy too much of force in a situation where all the sides are armed, and of course where we're seeing so much of violence, you know, violence that is leading to nowhere, violence that is obviously being perpetrated by people who are gradually becoming nihilist. And of course the two resource persons, the two elders, you know, raised some very, very fundamental questions which have also had some respectable elder statesmen raised before, that, you know, that things have happened in the past that is making them ask the question, are they really still part of this country? So what's wrong with us answering that question? You know, what's wrong with our leaders or those at the helms of power answering that question? And the simple response is, yes, you're still part of Nigeria. Now, what do you want, you know, to bring about, to bring about peace on all the sides? The measures are not too far-fetched. You know, it just takes some courage, some political will. One, I think, first and foremost, even if it's going to be at the level of experimentation, get Nnamdi Kanu released. Get him released and see the extent to which this will go to pacify the restive youths, the violent youths, or the unknown government perpetrating this level of crime that is becoming very, very disturbing. Yes, we keep saying that it is the people that are affected, the economy is being affected, but the Nigeria entity is also being affected because there's a level of interconnection, you know, cross-cutting interaction that happen amongst all the sides. We cannot deny the fact that we are also being affected. So we can get into this conversation, release him, and after that, then look at some more fundamental issues, you know, some subterranean issues that are deep-seated, question of exclusion, you know, from national government. What's wrong with, forget about the voting pattern, the fact that they probably didn't vote for you, show some greater grace, include some more Igbo men in government, and of course, go beyond that as well, and think about the creation of more states in the place. You know, by the time you give them some higher level of attention, it's just about having that courage. It's not like you think that you're succumbing to some level of, I beg your pardon, to some level of blackmail. I think it is statesmanship, it is statecraft. And of course, nations around the world have embarked on different levels of moves, to assuage, complaining sections in the interest of nation building. Remember, in the past, we've talked about dot in the circle, we've talked about Biafra. People are beginning to imagine, a better nation, in an emerging state of Biafra. Rightly or wrongly, though, but again, you have to take step, systematic step, to get them to think away from this direction. Because that's why I said it's a question of the mind now, not necessarily about matter.
Okay, let me bring in Dr. Adamu here quickly here, and before we round off by talking about some key solutions, let's pick two other key things from this findings by Beacon Consulting. The reason behind the death and why there seem to be some, less of such in the Southeast, because everyone thought that the Southeast had more of that, but again, your findings have shown quite the contrary.
Yeah, remember that the report is for June, and I'm sure almost certain that by the time we release that of July, we'll probably see an increase. And it's revealing. If we do see an increase, what is the reason for the increase? Yeah. The agitation and the violence by a particular group, how that is contributing to fatalities in a region, and our inability as a state to prevent that from happening. To that extent, I agree with the statements coming. Where I differ is the fact that we should reward offending, as it were, with some level of, whatever a reward we want to give it. I think we should go back, take a step back and ask ourselves, what are the provisions of our law? The response by the immediate past government is that they caught injunction asking that he should be freed. There was a stay of execution. Now, I think this government needs to go back to that. Was there a stay of execution? What was the basis of that? What did it follow due course and all of that? But I am not an advocate of us voiding the law. We should comply with the provisions of the Constitution and our laws. Now, if the court says he should be released and there are grounds for that, of course he should be released. But it still leaves us with a problem. The incitement, the advocating of violence that is still happening, that should not be condoned in any way. So my submission is threefold. A security solution, a political solution that has a diplomatic component to it, and then of course a whole of community approach. Some of the narratives I'm hearing coming out from the Southeast, I don't think it would really help. We need to accept where someone is at fault. We need to accept that that person is at fault and condemn him in a manner that discourages others who want to toe that line. If we pretend that that fault, quote and unquote, does not exist, all we're doing is we're encouraging others to toe his line. And as a country, I don't think that's what. It's the same thing I'm advocating for the Northwest as an example, the bandits. When they break the law, they should be treated like that. So when someone breaks the law in the Southeast, he should also be treated in that manner. And
quickly here, one more with you, Kabir Adamu. How can security be deployed without any form of pushback from the same people who so demand for security?
What is the essence of security? Protection. So if someone realizes, and I think this is why I consistently, in the report, we spoke about security sector governance and to an extent security sector reform. If as a Nigerian I can relate with the fact that security is there to protect me and my property, then I'm going to support security. If, however, a group of persons are able to exercise the kind of influence, I want us to appreciate the relevance of the word influence. If they are able to come out with an injunction to say sit at home and enforce it, then something is wrong with our capacity as a state. And that is what makes the distrust, the huge gap between the governed and the government will continue to widen for as long as we cannot protect them. And I think that's what we need to ensure we're capable of doing. Is it by the use of military force? No. There are about 27 ministries, departments, and agencies in government. If we're going to enforce all of them to play their constitutional mandate, the weapons that these guys are using, I mean, we don't manufacture those weapons. They're coming in through, most likely, either our sea or land or from other water bodies. So many components of law enforcement. If we can strengthen it and reduce the capacity of these non-state armed groups to exercise influence, then the average Nigerian, irrespective of where he lives, will see the state as something he can relate with and support better. So again, three components. The security component is important. The political component, which almost everybody has spoken to. Yeah. Of course, the diplomatic. The guy in question lives in another country that has an embassy here. We have a diplomatic relationship with that person. So the powers of the state, our national powers, I think is what we need to ask. And to that extent, I think the Office of the National Security Advisor, with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and several other agencies of government would need to sit together and come up with a strategic approach on how to manage this issue.
Okay, Professor Adeniyi, let's close this with you. And he's given three key solutions: security solution, political solution, and the diplomatic aspect of it. Let us in more on the non-kinetic approach you spoke about. And he spoke about sensitizing the people, perhaps, that may work.
You see, in a fragile, multi-ethnic society like ours, you continue to see an Abubakar Shekau coming up at some point, one time or the other. You continue to see an Nnamdi Kanu, and of course a Simon Ekpa. You may not be able to, exclude them at some point in the future. What matters is what the society does to respond to this kind of emergencies, or to prevent them from emerging, which is why multi-ethnicity requires continuous painstaking management. Sometimes it may even go beyond the black letter law, beyond stipulations of the Constitution. You might want to employ extra judicial means in the positive sense, to negotiate belonging, to negotiate integration, to give them sense of inclusion. And that's the point where I think we are getting to with the case of the Southeast. Yes, the law has been there. We know that our security agencies also have limitations. And they are undermanned. We are talking about increasing their number, the strength of our fighting forces. Where we're talking of them, we're also talking about declining resources. How do we accommodate that, to guarantee sustainability? All these problems are confronting us. At the same time, we need to deal with monstrous levels of non-state actors, troubling us as disturbing our peace, and of course, threatening the economy of a nation at a time where we need some level of stability. So the point overall is that we just have to up the ante a little bit in the area of consultation, in the area of conversation. One of the resource persons said earlier that in the build-up to elections, they were able to talk to some people, and they permitted election. So if it could happen at some point, why don't we sustain it? Which means that these fellows are not spirits. They're watching us. They are listening. They are sensible. They know what they are doing. Why don't we engage more in psychological operation, dealing with their minds, trying to develop appropriate messages, coming from different angles, multi-level perspectives, so that we can all have some level of peace. Warfare is not always about kinetic. It's not always about having boots on the ground. Sometimes it's about negotiation.
Well, it's a fine place for us to say many thanks for being such a nice company, Professor Adeniyi and Dr. Adamu. Many thanks for coming on Arise Prime Time.